Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our regular family of seekers. Pretty regular family now. We meet every Monday, Thursday at 7:30 a.m., and I look forward to it every week. It really nourishes the heart, the soul, and kind of like equips us for going out in this material world with some level of like steadiness. So thank you all for coming and doing the work and being here today. Um, Today we are in chapter 6. We're going to do 3 texts. We're going to start with text 17. We're talking about this path of Ashtanga yoga. So the Gita teaches us, or the Gita talks about many different paths of yoga and ultimately recommends bhakti yoga. But chapter 6, what we're in today, is kind of talking about Ashtanga yoga, breaking it down and talking about kind of the pros and cons. So with that, let's get into it. 16, text 16, whenever you're ready, Stella. Oh, no, wait, we're on 17. I'm sorry. We're on 17.
Yeah, I thought we had read that one last time.
Yeah.
Okay, 17. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
Thank you. Okay, this is a big one. And just like the never-ending challenge of life, is finding this balance and regulating our eating, our sleeping, our time off, our work. And Krishna's telling us right here in the Gita that yoga becomes effective, like it truly destroys suffering only when our daily lives are balanced. So this is so important. If our material habits are erratic or excessive, our spiritual practice will be scattered too. So we really need this steadiness. Then without the steadiness, there won't be much fruit from the yoga practice. Whatever fruit we're looking for, liberation, peace, deep realization, connection with God, right? They all require this consistent effort and a lifestyle that supports focus. And we'll look at each one of these. Like we'll start with eating. This is a big one. Who cannot relate to needing to find balance in eating? Eating on a schedule. This is the Gita recommends is this regulation, eating at certain times of the day and eating certain quantities. This keeps the mind from like wandering to food all the time. It's like you ever sit down to do something and it's like all you can think about is eating, and it just scatters our energy. But if we eat at these regular times, we kind of get our body regulated, our mind regulated to that, and we free up mental space for more meaningful engagement. It's funny too. We talk about the body's like a car, and a car will body, it's like our vehicle for this soul in this eternal journey of life. Right? And so a car will like signal when the fuel tank is low, And in the same way, our body gives signals when the stomach is empty. When we're hungry, our stomach will growl or we'll feel it. We'll feel the signal. And in both cases, we'll respond, right? We'll respond by refueling. But it's funny, when we refuel our bodies, we rarely overfill a gas tank, right? We don't really do that. But when we refill our bodies, it's common that we overfill our stomachs, right? And the difference here between an actual car and the body as a vehicle is that the body is attached to the mind. We talk so much about the mind in this chapter, but the mind, it's crucial. It's meant to receive and interpret the body's signals clearly. But what it oftentimes does is distort these signals or even like fabricate its own and present them as if they're coming from the body. The mind may want junk food. The mind may want to eat more than we actually need. And then these things, they don't energize us. They drain us actually, because the body has to work harder to digest and to process. So that's why the Gita encourages this regulation, eating at fixed times, appropriate quantities. You set up this reasonable routine to meet our body's needs. And when we have this reasonable routine to meet our body's needs, it's easier to notice when our cravings are pulling us outside of that. When our cravings are to differentiate between those mental cravings and the physical ones. So the key to this is this self-observation, right? Learning to distinguish between these needs and the noisy demands of the mind. And the body is sometimes really quiet. Sometimes the mind just overrides the body so much that like we can't even feel the signals anymore because our mind is just so loud. So that's why it's so important that we calm the mind. We have to learn to calm the mind, to steady the mind, so that we can actually connect to what's going on. And that's what we do in yoga practice. We train ourselves. We train ourselves to calm the mind, right? To respond differently, even when we feel when these urges come. And when we do feel them, we can turn to things that are more grounding, like deep breathing, like mantra chanting, a wisdom quote. And this will help quiet that mental chatter, and it'll create space for the body's true needs to surface. Right? It's funny, when I was actually last night when I was putting together this class, my husband has been gone for a couple days. He was at work in Ohio, and so I was watching our daughter. And for some reason yesterday she was just fussy all day long, no matter what I did. So when my husband got home, I was like literally like standing outside, just ready to hand her off. It was like such a brutal day. And so then I sit down to do this, and it's like all I want to do is like go to the cabinet and get these chocolate covered almonds that I got. This like big thing of it. I'm like, you know what? I deserve it. This is gonna make me feel better. I'm feeling so just like yuck. And this is usually what I do when I feel bad. I like reach for something sweet to just like kind of take the edge off, right? Just to kind of calm, just to kind of distract me from what I'm feeling. Because, I also was feeling all these things, like I feel bad because yesterday there were times I was just like, I just dreaming of just walking out of the room and leaving her in the room, if I'm being honest. It was just like a brutal day. So anyway, I sit down and I do this class because, I'm committed to it and I enjoy it. And so I'm doing it and I'm putting this together and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, don't go for the cabinet. Don't go for this is just, it's like becoming so obvious what I do when I'm feeling this way, these kinds of band-aids. And so the night progressed and I didn't go to the cabinet. And it was like, I was like, wow, that was a win. It doesn't always happen like that, but because I immersed myself in this wisdom and really connected with it and felt nourished because of it. Actually, when I was even done making this class and I was just kind of relaxing, it was like, I don't even want to go to the cabinet. It was like that desire was even gone because it was so nourished from this wisdom. And so that's what it can do for us. And that's how it can help calm the mind when the mind is shouting at us to step outside of our regulation for a quick fix, you know? And then this is when yoga becomes more than just a practice, it becomes a pathway to freedom ultimately, because and that's what I experienced last night, that freedom from the constant pull of food that I use to kind of mask when I'm feeling something uncomfortable. And it was liberating. I was like, wow, this is peaceful. Actually, I felt very peaceful. So that's what this practice can do for us. Stacy, did you have your hand up? Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay, then Maria.
Yes. I know you're all going to not believe this because I'm large, but no, I don't ever have cravings. I really do eat just, small portions as I'm hungry and stop when I'm not hungry. And I never overeat or anything. What happened was my thyroid went out of whack in my 40s. and I gained 170 pounds in a month and a half.
Oh my gosh.
But the weird thing is, I never ate different or did anything any different throughout this whole time. Now all of a sudden I'm losing. Like 5 years ago, I lost 50 pounds. Now I just lost 25. So I guess my thyroid's okay now.
Wow. Yeah.
But the funny thing was that whenever it happened, I thought, oh, thank God nobody will be attracted to me anymore because I had all these broken engagements because I'm not commitment prone. And I was engaged like 14 or 16 times or something.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that about you.
I did marry twice only because they wouldn't quit asking and they wouldn't go away. I had to say, let's run to a justice of the peace before I change my mind. But anyways, yeah, no, I can't identify with running to food, but I guess I had other things that I needed to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing. It's always fun to learn more about you guys. And yeah, in that way, we're all different, but then, when you dig deep enough to the root, it's like we all kind of deal with these same things, and then we find different ways to find some comfort or some escape, or yeah, if you don't relate to the food, maybe there's something else. Like, we're going to the next one, sleep. This is not one that is big for me. I don't struggle like oversleeping, but I know some people, if you're feeling, again, really uncomfortable in life, you just want to like tap out and just go to sleep. That's another like method of like escaping. I mean, but again, it's so important that we're regulated with our sleep. And not even that we just get enough of it, but it's like that we go to bed around the same time. We wake up around the same time. We get our bodies just kind of regulated to that. And in that way, we're setting ourselves up so that in that window that we're awake, we're the most like productive and like alert. Because if some people will like hit the snooze button like 10 times. Anybody do that? Like hit the snooze button 10 times? I'll throw my husband under the bus. He does that. And it drives me it drives me crazy because it's just like once it goes off once, I'm up and then I'm just like laying there just like wasting time. And that's what it is if you're just constantly hitting it, it's like you're just, that whole hour that you're hitting snooze, you're not really sleeping, you're not really awake. It's like, okay, you just lost an hour of your life. And it just drags you down. So the sleeping, it's important that we find that right amount of sleep. Stacy, your hands up. Is it purposely up, Stacy?
Right. There we go. Sorry, I'm on my phone today, so
Oh, no
trying to
problem.
get used to that. So I'm going to throw my husband under the bus, and he does the same thing, and the alarm's going off, and as soon as it goes off, I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just lay down, and I'm like, okay, now I'm Krishna up. Krishna is my that's my love word. Now I'm Krishna up and you're keep falling back to sleep and and now I just when I hear it and it wakes me, I just get up and I start chanting.
Yeah,
Because otherwise like this big block of time where you're laying in bed, you're not sleeping and you're just for me, I can't say you. I start to get annoyed and I'm like, "Really, George? Just get up." You know? And
yeah.
that's his anarta, right? So
Right. Yeah. And it's good to think too that next time maybe I'll think that when I'm frustrated with my husband when the alarm's going off, it's like, you struggle with waking up. I struggle with going to the cabinet. So it's like we all have these
what
different.
chapter, what chapter are we on?
We're on
It's
chapter 6, text 17.
perfect. Okay.
So
Thank you for letting me share.
yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing. So the next one, working too much. This can be a big obstacle. And this is another way that people escape, sometimes it's even masked behind like being productive. But again, we have to be careful what we're putting our energy into and what we're like over endeavoring, because when we're working too much, it creates stress. It drains our energy. It pulls our focus outward. Right. So it's not just bad for spiritual life, it can take a toll on our health, on our relationships, on our peace of mind. So we need to be careful when we're choosing our work. We have to think long term, like will this pace be sustainable? Will it support a balanced, purposeful life? Because our work life is just a part of our life, and it should support the bigger picture, the bigger focus. And when it gets out of balance, again, it can pull us down. And then the other thing here, you said regulating your recreation. So it's also important to take breaks. Even yogis who spend their days in deep meditation take breaks. They walk, they'll observe nature, or they'll just rest, right? Because even this spiritual practice needs balance. So these breaks, they're essential throughout the day. Not even just like nice to haves, but they're real necessities for like well-being and effectiveness. Stacy, we're on chapter 6, text 17. So just like a machine needs to be turned off occasionally to function properly, our body and mind system also needs regular pauses to recharge. If we push ourselves too hard without rest, we'll get drained, distracted, we'll be less effective. And research even supports this. I was reading this study that found that the most productive employees worked in 52-minute stretches followed by 17-minute breaks. And I think I've taken classes before, like in the corporate world, it's like that. 50 minutes, it was more like 50 minutes of work and then a 10-minute break. And this makes you more productive, like get more done in the long run. So it's proven that this balance is essential to keep this body-mind vehicle like functioning properly. Taking these breaks, finding this balance in our eating, our sleeping, our work, our recreation. Right? Sometimes we'll notice that we're too busy and we need to slow down. Like we'll recognize that. But we should also understand that slowing down externally doesn't automatically slow down the mind. Right? Like if you're used to this super hectic environment, just because you get rid of some things in your life, you condense your schedule a little bit, which is good, don't necessarily expect your mind to follow pace. Because the mind's pace is largely influenced by those 3 modes of material nature, right? There's this goodness, passion, and ignorance. So when the mind is in passion, it's going to be frantically busy no matter what. Right? It's going to find something to worry about. It's going to find something to desire. It's going to find something that it needs to do. So look out for this. If we're like, oh, our life's too busy, I need to kind of prioritize. Notice the state that your mind's in. And recognize it, observe it, and then work to elevate it, right? Like if your mind's in ignorance and you are less busy, it may slow down. It may show up as like, wasting time, wasting money, being lazy, distracted, right? So ultimately we want our mind to be in the mode of goodness. That's where it's active, but it's not chaotic. Like it's busy, but it's balanced. So to elevate the mind to goodness, it's just slowing down isn't enough, right? We have to use that time and the space that we've created to engage in uplifting activities, right? Activities that are going to uplift our consciousness, like introspection, like spiritual reading, like meditation, mindful service, these things that can start to elevate our minds. And then as we rise to this mode of goodness, we'll begin to work at a pace that aligns with both our unique nature and our deeper spiritual purpose. Right? So be mindful of that pitfall too. Right? That we have to work on. We have to work on the mind. Ultimately, that's where it all is. If we really want to attain this real balance in our life, in our lives. So does anybody else want to share a place where they notice imbalance in their lives? Maybe sleep, work, eating, and how it ultimately affects your spiritual focus or just your overall well-being? Anybody want to be vulnerable and share? Okay.
You're talking about when the mind is not focused or it's not in the mode of goodness, right? And that is, I don't know if I should share. My mother-in-law was here last week And all the time she's talking about lunch, dinner, snacks. What are we going to do? What are we going to cook? What are we going to eat? She has this habit of repeating the same thing again and again all day long. And then she talks, okay, my father-in-law. So she talks, okay, Papa will eat this, Papa, and I'll eat this and this. And I'm not interested to know. So that time I lose my focus because I cannot ignore her. She comes for a week or so and I have to be with her, give her company and cook with her. So I'm like, I'm ready whenever she's ready to leave.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example of a mind in the mode of passion.
Yeah, I don't want, I want her here and all that. And so many times then I tell her, okay, mom, let's sit down and she reads she reads Sundarkand and things like that. So I tell her that, okay, you read this or you listen to your satsang and I listen to my satsang, I do my thing. And then she'll be okay for like few minutes. Then she's again back to normal. So I have to go upstairs and then she's sitting downstairs. So that
Yeah.
kind, how it
Yeah.
becomes disturbing.
Yeah, that association, it can really impact us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can really affect our minds too. So
Yeah.
even balancing or regulating that kind of association
Yeah,
is important because it impacts our own balance.
it does. I was going to text you last week that, okay, my mother-in-law is here and she's going on and on and on.
Yeah. No, it's and then just finding time away to do this, and I'm sure that's what you did, right? Is to plug yourself into things that elevate your mind, right? So that you're
Yeah,
less impacted by the pull going on around you. Because naturally we're going to be impacted, so we have to be proactive.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. Of course, there are so many other things.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing. Stacy.
It's funny because when I really was, I really wanted to get like I wanted to read every single Bhagavad Gita, not Bhagavad Gita, every canto in the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Instruction, then Sri Upanishads. I want to read everything before my initiation. Like, and you know what? Like, I was in like morning classes on Zoom. Then I was finding classes from London that were in the middle of the day. Then I had classes at night, and I started to like a little bit lose my mind because I was like, it's all spiritual and it's all good information, but it's really my mind was like, I don't know if I'm even soaking anything in because I'm reading 5 or 6 or 7 different books in one day and I'm not even sure what chapter I'm in. So my mind was like, Stacy, you will learn. You are going to learn. You know a lot now, but you're going to learn more, and pick 2 or 3 things in the morning, pick 2 or 3 things at the night, and show up for that. And that way, because I can't soak in all that information from 10 different books. And so it's like the mind literally will show up. Like, I have been in this really peaceful, grateful space since I got back from India a long time ago now. And but it's just like it literally, it's one of those things where the mind doesn't give up. It'll say, even your spiritual life, it'll try and make you nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. We bring that material conditioning to our spiritual practices or to our spiritual life. I mean, it's just natural that we would do that, but it's good that you recognize it and also it's like if you're feeling not peaceful, if you're feeling restless, if you're feeling, that even though you're practicing spiritual life, you're still in the mode of passion or you could be in the mode of ignorance, to recognize that and to try to take more shelter.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say this, and I'm going to have to leave early, which I hate to do that because I love your show. Please keep me involved and let me know what's happening. But what I want to say is, somebody used to say to me, what, I just need to get away for the weekend. And my a good friend, she would say, I know what's going on with you, and just remember that you can go away, but you're going to take yourself with you.
Yeah, right.
So it's something that I just always like remember, that like you can't get away from yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Just like we were talking about, even like reducing your to do the things in your life, your mind is still going to be in that mode. And the only way that we can elevate ourselves, get out of that mode, get closer to the mode of goodness, is by taking that time to invest our mind in things like introspection, wisdom text, mantra, these things that will elevate our consciousness, and then we'll see too that our lives will start to reflect more balance, reflect more mode of goodness, because that's where our mind is. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So the last thing here that we're going to talk about in this verse is the importance of time, right? Many of us are like very conscious of how we spend our money. We're very careful. No, but we're not so much so when we think about our time, right? Well, we wouldn't throw our money away carelessly, but we do it with our time without even thinking. And it's so funny because time, it's like irrecoverable. Once it's gone, it's gone. So every moment is being spent, whether we realize it or not. And a serious spiritual practitioner is defined by that sense of purpose and urgency. They don't just let the time pass. They invest it carefully with intention. And so it's good for us to think about how we're spending our time, and not to like stress out about it, or bring our material conditioning to that like control. That's not what we're trying to do, but we're trying to be mindful and notice when we're wasting our time, right? And try to use that time for something meaningful, right? And sometimes, we will notice that we spend too much time maintaining this mind-body vehicle, right? Like we talked about this the last time, like a driver who becomes so obsessed with their car that they spend all their time like polishing it and parading it, and not even really using it for what it's meant for. We can do the same thing with our mind-body vehicles. We can become overly focused on our bodies, right? So overly focused on our health. It's good to be healthy, but it's like if you're spending your whole day just like on this health routine, and there's times in your life that you may need to, but like generally speaking, we shouldn't become too obsessed with the body that we forget what it's actually for, right? Just so that it looks good, right? And on the other side, we shouldn't neglect the body, right? We know the body requires regular maintenance. It's a vehicle for the soul. It's on a multi-life journey of spiritual evolution, right? But if we spend our whole lives catering to the bodily needs and comforts, we risk becoming trapped in this bodily consciousness, right? And that leaves little time or inclination even to explore our spiritual nature, right? So we don't want to ignore the body, right? We don't want to ignore the body. But we need to meet the body's basic needs with intention and balance. Otherwise, these practices, meditation, study of spiritual texts, meant to elevate our consciousness, they can become unnecessarily difficult. Okay, so it's not about catering to the body or rejecting it. It's about relating to it differently. It's seeing the body as a tool for spiritual service. And this should help us care for it wisely without getting pulled in to serving the ego full time. Okay? And we know serving the ego full time, that is stressful. If all we're worried about is how beautiful and fit our body is, it's like that is a life of anxiety. So as we continue, let's just remember, regulation isn't about restriction, it's about freedom. It's about structuring our lives in a way that supports the things that matter most. Right? Because when our outer life is balanced, our inner life has room to grow. So this will like if we can practice this in our lives, we'll see our spiritual life like take a major step up. If we can create this external balanced environment that's conducive, it's like the fertile soil. Maybe not all the fertile soil, but it's an important thing for nurturing this little seedling of our spiritual life. Okay, let's go to the next verse, which we're going to switch gears a little bit and go to we're in the Ashtanga yoga system. There's 8 limbs. And the first 4 limbs are more about like acting in the world, the do's and don'ts, asana, pranayama. And then the last 4 limbs are more about like turning inwards and samadhi. And in the 6th chapter, Krishna kind of jumps between them. He talks about the things that are important on like the bodily platform, and then he'll talk about like samadhi. And so now we just talked about regulating the body. Now we're going to jump to one of the further limbs and talk about this samadhi, this absorption. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the Ashtanga yoga context, and then we'll always bring it back to the bhakti context because so many of us here are practicing bhakti. Okay, so let's 18. I'll share my screen whenever you're ready, Stella.
When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, again, Krishna's describing the path of Ashtanga yoga. Okay, and it's important to remember that while Krishna outlines this path, his overall intention is to help Arjuna see how difficult and impractical it is, right? For someone in his situation. Like Arjuna's a warrior. He's living in the world. He's not a renunciant, like meditating in seclusion. Right? So, but even though Ashtanga yoga isn't the final recommendation of the Gita, there's still value in understanding its principles. So Krishna shares them not to endorse it as the best path, but to contrast it with bhakti yoga, the path of devotional service. And by the end of the chapter, actually, Krishna will clearly state that the topmost yogi is the one who engages in loving devotion to him. So as we talk about these verses, again, we'll kind of weave in and out, like talking about Ashtanga, talking about bhakti. And we're not switching tracks, we're just enriching our understanding of bhakti while seeing what the other yogic paths offer. Right? And how bhakti includes their benefits while going further. Okay, so to bring it back to this verse, Krishna says, the yogi becomes situated in transcendence, free from material desires, and steady in the mind. Okay, so in the Ashtanga yoga context, we'll talk about samadhi as defined by like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, right? I'll give like a super quick brief overview, and if you're more interested in this definition of samadhi, you can reference that text, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. But there's the samadhi, there's like different, it's a spectrum of samadhi. Samadhi is a spectrum. There's different stages, right? So the first stage is where like the mind is absorbed in like a single object. It's like focused on an object, right? And in this, the mind can become focused and steady. It'll help like quiet the distractions and begin turning inwards. So that's like one of the beginning stages of samadhi. But as a practitioner, goes deeper, one reaches this state where the mind becomes completely still, right? It's like no thoughts, no duality, just pure spiritual awareness. So when they're focusing on an object, it's like they're still aware of this material existence. They still have that cognizance, though they're very focused on an object. Right? But in this more advanced stage of samadhi, it's like there's nothing. Like they're so absorbed that they're not even aware of material consciousness. Okay, so that's just like a tiny little definition of samadhi, or glimpse of samadhi as defined by the Ashtanga practice, Ashtanga yoga. Now in bhakti yoga, this same transcendence comes through consistent remembrance of Krishna in all of our activities. right? So it's like when yoga becomes full-time, when spiritual connection infuses everything we do, right? Then our entire life becomes a sacred offering. So this is how the bhakti yogi achieves samadhi. So to do this, we need to learn to direct our consciousness, right? Like our senses can be engaged, but our sensual desires don't have to be agitated. For example, we can eat, but when we eat with awareness that the food is Krishna's, right? That consciousness purifies us. So this same action, eating, either binds us or frees us, depending on our inner awareness. So this is how the bhakti yogi would go about achieving samadhi in their lives. Does that make sense? It's all about just like spiritualizing whatever we're doing. You know, it doesn't require like ending our physical or mental activity or like trying to silence the mind completely. No, the goal is to engage the mind deeply and lovingly in remembrance of God. Okay, so it's not about emptiness, it's about fullness, right? Of relationship, of emotion, of divine connection. So instead of detaching from all activity, which is what's happening in the Ashtanga yoga practice, the bhakta becomes absorbed in divine activity. Right? They begin to perceive Krishna's presence everywhere. And that's the unique beauty of bhakti. It transforms everyday life into a spiritual experience, right? And not by withdrawing from the world, but by engaging in it with love and devotion. So we can think about in our activity in our daily lives, like eating, walking, working. You know, where could we start doing that with more spiritual awareness? And how might that shift our experience from routine to sacred? Does anybody want to share anything about that? Like what in your daily life that you could start doing with more spiritual awareness? I'm thinking about going back to work. And the person that wants to hire me is a devotee. And I went in to talk to him, and his there was like a little altar in his office, and then the first thing he starts asking me, or we start talking about, is like something related to spiritual practice, you know, and it felt like so purifying to be like in a work environment, but to have that kind of like interaction and relationship, such that it like where I was like not considering at all working, I was like, I could see myself maybe doing this a little bit. You know, it's like and this little altar in his office, like when I went in there, I like, you know, just like honored the altar, and it just felt purifying. You know, and that might not you might make it conducive to have something like that in your work environment, but where in your life could you start having more spiritual awareness, and how will it shift your experience? Right? Stella.
I I'm very lucky that I work at a university that's a Catholic university, so I can put pictures, of Krishna around my office, like that I'm allowed to do that, which is amazing. But even better is that all the spiritual texts are in the library. Like we have the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. We have
Wow.
all the books. Like we have the biggest Vaishnava collection in the Midwest, probably.
Wow.
It at a small school, but and so the building is a temple. So when I go to work, I think it's the Lord lives there in His book form. So uh I try to bring that back to my awareness when I'm feeling like, oh my God, I don't want to be at work. I like my work, but sometimes you're like, I don't want to be at work, and I'm like, but wait, I'm in a temple. Like it's Krishna's palace in a way, like it's
Yeah.
so I'm not realized enough to really make it change my behavior, but at least that thought totally changes the frame and gets me out of that kind of like, I don't wanna, like that kind
Right.
um, that kind of like material sloth kind of stuff. But and even my house, with the altar in it, it's Krishna's house. It's his palace. So even, sitting here, I just feel like, wow, Krishna's allowing me to reside in his home and do these things and associate with these people in a peaceful setting. I feel so grateful and lucky. Um, so again, it comes back to that gratitude. If you can reframe in that spiritual way. So yeah, I like that. And even in the verse it says devoid of material desires. But that doesn't mean devoid of desires. There can be spiritual desires. Like,
Mm,
I really do want to live in Krishna's real home someday, like spiritual home. Like, that's my desire. And if I could practice that by thinking that this house is his palace, his little shack out here in the wilderness, that maybe that desire, I can fan the flame of that desire.
yes. Yeah. That's bhakti, what you just said. It's like realizing that everything is Krishna's. None of this is ours. And when we can start to interact with buildings, with people, with everything around us with that realization, it purifies us. It purifies us so that when we go to the spiritual world, we're ready.
We're ready.
Yeah, that's exactly what bhakti is. So even when we're in this world, we can interact with it, but we're void of desires, of selfish desires, but we're connecting to Krishna through those things in remembrance of him. Yeah, I thank you for that. That was really nice. That was really nice. Mariah says, at work, when I get to make the food dishes for people, instead of taking orders and talking, I try to chant, I try to chant softly to myself. That completely changed my attitude at work. I used to get annoyed at the music playing, but now I'm able to direct my mind to chant softly. So nice. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, where in our lives can we just insert a little bit more Krishna and a little less material conditioning, material pulls? Now, some people even like they'll get in their car and they'll have like a little picture of Krishna on the windshield or their conception of God. Just something to bring you back. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to constantly remember. And so that in our interactions and in our as we go about our days, we're not just remembering Krishna, but we're acting in a way that we remember Krishna. Right? We're not getting too caught up in the material ups and downs. We're kind of acting at a level even above that. We're not too pulled in either direction, because we're in this world, but we're not maybe of this world. That's where we want to get to. We're acting on this higher plane. Anita, did you want to share something, or is that a high five?
I just wanted to add a little bit because it's so beautiful that everyone is sharing. Um, but for me, I also have the same practice. You know, I have an altar in my house and it's one room, but I have all the deities and I have Lord Krishna everywhere also in the house. And I have it in the car and at work. So my boss is a Krishna devotee, but not he doesn't follow the her Krishna movement, but he just is a Krishna devotee, and he has the Lord Krishna and Radha Murti in his office, and I have the picture at my desk. So it's always I'm not there where I put my entire thought and focus onto Lord Krishna when there is because my job can be so stressful when I'm dealing with clients, and lots of them are of Indian nature. They're Indian background, and it's very difficult sometimes. But I don't always get to the point where I'm I remember Krishna at that time. Um, so maybe, yes, I'll try to do that more often. But yeah, these little, reminders that it's all about Lord Krishna grace. But it's so beautiful to hear everyone sharing. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you all. And me and my boss, we would discuss the Bhagavad Gita, and he would also share his take on it, which is like very, very interesting. And he has a one-to-one take with Lord Krishna. He is at that level where he understands exactly where he came from and where he's going. And he does all these little things like the charity, the goodness, the in the name of Krishna, but so quietly and so in the background, not because not everyone is going to understand this lecture that you're doing and this level of understanding, even though millions of people will pray to the same Lord Krishna. But where you're taking this level of understanding the Gita, it is so high that even sometimes your own spouse will not understand what you're trying to enlighten them with until it comes to them. Like we all know that until it comes to you, you'll not get it. And so many times we will spend time with him discussing this in his office, but I'm the only one who he can communicate with on the Gita. But thank you again, all of you. I have come a far way in understanding it and understanding myself. And yes, I do have the craving, the eating habits, and I do turn to sweet when in that moment I want something sweet, but I'm trying.
Mm.
I'm trying.
Yes.
Thank you.
So nice. Thank you. Way to pull it all together. Yeah. In
Thank you.
that moment, try to remember because just that remembrance will pull you out. I know Brittany listens to the podcast. Many of you know her. She wears a mala bracelet on her wrist and she'll take it off and she'll like chant or hold it or, and that helps her remember. So whatever it is, try it on when you're reaching for something else for comfort or
Thank
whenever you
you.
need it. Yeah, we remember and just that remembrance purifies us. So let's do one more verse and this one will tie it all together. 19, 2:19. Thank you all for all of your beautiful shares today. When you're ready, Stella.
As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. It's
So
hard to
nice.
say. A transcendent self.
Thank you. Thank you. So this verse is really pulling it all together. He's offering a powerful image here, right? A lamp in a windless place. Okay, so just as a flame remains steady where there's no breeze, a yogi whose mind is under control stays steady in meditation. So in this analogy, the flame represents our consciousness and the wind symbolizes material desires. So when there's no material desires, there's no hankering, there's no anxiety over not getting what we want when we want it. The consciousness is still, right? When the wind of desire is present, our consciousness is flickering. It's moving from one thought to another, one craving to the next. Desire, anxiety, frustration, anger. We know how all this works. But when the desire is stilled, the mind becomes calm. It becomes focused. It becomes unwavering. Like a flame that's untouched by wind. We can see this. We can see this in people's eyes, right? When we think about, people who are looking around restlessly all the time. It's searching for the next source of pleasure, or anxiously anticipating the next problem. We can see this in just a person's eyes. We can feel it in their energy. And by contrast, when you think about a saintly person, I think about my guru. And it's funny because I actually was thinking about this before I read this verse, and I heard this analogy, that it's like in my guru's eyes and even his presence, it's like he's like the most busy, in-demand person I know, but he's like so steady. You wouldn't even know it when you sit down with him. It's like he's steady. And I mean, it's to the point where it's like when I'm with him, I'm almost like, I am like a little self-conscious of just how restless I am, just how affected I am by the modes, because it's so clear that he's not. I mean, he's moving around in this world, but he's like on another plane. He's reached this place. Now that he's peaceful. He's not dull. Like he's alert, but not anxious. Because this inner anchor is steady. And that's the difference. When you get to a place where this is just a part of, it's just, there's no difference. Like you're just always remembering Krishna and everything that you do. And that's what it brings. It brings this level of peace and steadiness. Prabhupada, people say Prabhupada was also an example of this. He moved with speed, but never with passion. Right? He was purposeful. He had never appeared like rushed or pressured. I think about that. I'm like, wow, I'm always rushed or pressured. And then I go back. It's so apparent when I speak to my guru how like rushed or pressured I am and how like peaceful he is, like almost just like walking, just like floating around, because the consciousness is fixed. It's rooted in Krishna. Right? And his mind is not scattered by material desires or anxieties. And because of that, he's just super productive. Right? So it shows that you can move quickly without being restless, and you can accomplish a lot without stress. Where so many of us are so busy without being focused. The mind, it's passionate. We may look active on the outside, but our attention is so scattered in the inside. And this is why morning sadhana is so important. And I can feel the difference in my mind when my daughter sleeps in and I get to do my full morning sadhana. It gives us time to calm the mind, to purify our consciousness, to realign with the absolute truth. Remember that Krishna is our ultimate protector, right? Our sustainer, our goal. And when we remember that, and when we're in that space, we know how it feels, right? It feels, we feel calm, we feel peaceful, right? And when we can take the time in the morning to do this, then when we go about our days, and then something happens, a natural, like something that maybe we didn't want to happen or something undesirable, or, we can remain calm. Right. And this calmness is anchored to Krishna. This is what he does for us. So when we're practicing devotees, this is what we need to do. We need to make this time for our morning sadhana so that it trickles through the rest of our day. Because we're not immune to the winds of these material desires. And then along with these desires come anxieties that pull our minds in all directions. Right? But through this consistent sadhana, through this chanting, through hearing, through our mindful spiritual practices, we can create this windless space within, right? Where our consciousness becomes less reactive, more anchored, right? And more capable of staying focused on what truly matters. So his message here, Krishna's message, it's simple, right? It's simple but profound. Fix your mind in one place and keep it free from material desires. And even if you continue to engage in the world, you won't be pulled off track. And that's the real strength of yoga. Okay, so to conclude here, as we've as we've seen in these verses, spiritual life isn't about escaping the world. It's about engaging in it with a conscious, regulated, and purposeful way. So Krishna's not asking us to renounce food or sleep or work or recreation, right? He's just inviting us to bring balance into these areas so that they can support and not sabotage our spiritual growth. Because when we live with intention, when we regulate our habits, when we create moments to pause, reflect, reconnect, our outer life becomes a foundation for that inner steadiness. And when our mind is calm and our desires are quieted, we're able to keep our consciousness anchored like a lamp in a windless place. Okay, so this is the power of yoga. It's not just a practice that we do on the mat or a meditative cushion, right? But it's a way of living where our everyday choices can become offerings of devotion. So as we move forward today and this week, let's just continually ask ourselves, how can I create more steadiness in my life? Right? How can I create more steadiness in my day? What can I let go of that's flickering my focus? And how can I make space for that deep, nourishing connection to Krishna that brings peace, right? Not just in stillness, but in the midst of life itself. Because Krishna's showing us, he's slowly teaching us, real yoga, it's not about withdrawing from life. It's about learning to carry spiritual connection into everything that we do. That's the goal here. That's what we're doing. That's why we come to classes like these, right? To remind ourselves. And it is possible. It's possible. Right? No matter how busy you are, no matter how many obligations you have, you can be engaged. Right? You can be engaged in the world, but still connected to Krishna. Right? And in that, whatever you're doing is purifying you, is bringing you closer to Krishna. Mariah says, I feel this so much, being busy without actually doing anything. My intention recently has been to be here now, to find the calm within the chaos. Yeah, so true. Thank you. Anybody else want to share anything before we leave? Okay, my friends. Well, I will see you Monday. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing. And have a great weekend.
Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing everything. Today we learned that, we get so much peace and freedom just by knowing more about Bhagavad Gita. That is so nice.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you, Radha. It was wonderful.